This is chapter 34, section 3, and it contains 3 pieces of reading, and it will lead us right up into the start of World War II, but not the United States entrance into World War II. So this first section specifically is called America Dooms Loyalist Spain. And so in 1936, we previously talked about several other dictators, Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler, and then we did an activity or are doing an activity this week where you will be introduced to a few more. One of those is Francisco Franco, who is pictured there in the top right, but he is leading an attempt to overthrow the republic form of government, the democratic government of Spain. And so this causes the Spanish Civil War, which lasts from 1936 to 1939, and is led, as I've already mentioned, by General Francisco Franco. Franco is aided by other dictators, specifically Hitler and Mussolini, and also receives some weapons from the Soviet Union. So it's a kind of a clear good guy, bad guy, in a sense of whose side is whose. While Franco is leading the revolution, the United States is sitting and watching and basically allows the Spanish democracy to fall because we at this point want to stay out of conflicts in other nations, in other parts of the world. So not only are we not involving ourselves in the Spanish Civil War and providing assistance to the legitimate government of Spain, we are also declining to build up our military, and in fact our Navy specifically we are allowing to decline, partially because we think a large military will lead us to being involved in wars, but also because of the tax burden that funding the military places on the taxpayers, which, remember, at this time are still trying to recover from the effects of the Great Depression. So this is one instance of many of the democracies of the world kind of standing on the sidelines as these ruthless dictators take over. At the same time, in 1937, Japan invades China. And so we've talked about kind of this back and forth that has existed between Japan and China throughout their histories. And so in 1937, Japan invades China. This becomes known as the Manchurian Incident, and it's becomes known as that because FDR doesn't want to invoke the Neutrality Acts, and so it's not officially declared a war from the United States' perspective, which allows us to continue to provide weapons to China and sell weapons to Japan. Again, a look at kind of boosting our economy rather than maintaining the democratic integrity of, or I guess, taking care of the rest of the world. While this is taking place, FDR delivers his quarantine speech in 1937 in Chicago specifically, which is heavily leans towards America remaining isolated. And so what FDR does in the speech is calls for ways to quarantine the aggressors that exist throughout the world. And he says that economic embargoes are the best way to do this. But the anti-interventionist, those who want to kind of remain isolated, think that this is way too much, and they decry FDR's speech. And so this kind of lets FDR know that there's going to be segments of the US population who are very much against any involvement in the United States and other parts of the world. With Japan in 1937, in their battle with China, they actually sink an American ship, the Panay, and 2 US troops are killed. And so this could lead to potential conflict. However, Japan quickly apologizes and pays reparations, and the United States is quick to accept that because at this point, the desire is to remain isolated. So we've appeased Japan, now turning towards our, as well as Europe's appeasement of Germany, and more specifically Adolf Hitler. So in 1935, Hitler begins violating the Treaty of Versailles in multiple ways. First, he starts to build up Germany's military and actually requires military service from all German citizens, whereas our military, I believe, had been limited to a cap of 100,000 troops. He far exceeds that. He also marches into and takes control of a piece of land between Germany and France, known as the Rhineland. And this is also when the persecution of the Jews and what Hitler terms as undesirables begins to take place. So you probably learned of events like Kristallnacht and the banning of Jews from owning businesses, property. That process starts in 1935. It is important to point out that concentration camps and the extermination of the Jewish population does not start until several years later, and we'll evaluate all of that. But this is kind of the first step towards that. In 1938, Hitler takes Austria and also wants the Sudetenland, which is a piece of Czechoslovakia. So we've got Hitler on the move. Great Britain and France, wanting to prevent German aggression, are eager to appease Hitler and make him happy. And so there's a meeting held. This meeting is important, and it is known as the Munich Conference. It takes place in Munich, Germany in September of 1938. And at the meeting, Great Britain and France tell Hitler he can have this piece of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, as long as this is it. He stops his advances. And so they basically, Britain and France basically are sacrificing the Sudetenland in exchange for Hitler guaranteeing peace. And so Hitler agrees to this. And so the question throughout Europe is, do we finally have peace in our time? 6 months later, March 1939, Hitler invades and takes the rest of Czechoslovakia. So we clearly do not have peace in our time. And so Hitler's belligerency continues and enacts, and actually a date that you need to know, and there are a couple of dates on this slide that are worth knowing, and I'm not big on dates, but there are some kind of tentpole dates that you need to know. So throughout the summer of 1939, both French and British had been trying to negotiate with Joseph Stalin just to act as a counterbalance to the power, the apparent rising power of Adolf Hitler. Neither side can really trust each other, and that completely falls apart, and the world is shocked on August 23rd, 1939, when Hitler and Stalin signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. And so you now have an alliance where Hitler does not have to worry about potentially fighting a two-front war because he's got the Soviet Union and an agreement that they're not going to attack. And beyond that, they're going to split any territory that is conquered. What this does for Hitler is empowers him to invade Poland. And so after August 23rd, Hitler comes out and demands a return of land from Poland that was lost by Germany in World War I. He's not granted that. And so just over a week later, September 1st, 1939, a week after the Nazi Soviet non-aggression pact was signed, Hitler invades Poland with the Blitzkrieg. That September 1st date marks the official beginning of World War I. So September 1st, 1939, Hitler's Blitzkrieg invasion of Poland marks the beginning of World War I because Britain and France, upholding their agreement with Poland, declare war on Germany. The United States at this time, their goal is to remain neutral. And so following the neutrality acts that were passed in 1935, 36, and 37, the United States is unable to sell weapons of war to Britain and France because they are in a declared war. Realizing that this causes a massive issue, FDR asked Congress to revise these acts, and after 6 weeks of debate in Congress, they do so. And so you have the passing of the Neutrality Act of 1939, which says that the European democracies could buy war materials from the United States on a cash and carry basis, meaning they come and pick up the weapons, they pay in cash, so we're not loaning them anything, and then they take them back. This eliminates the United States' need to allow countries to go into debt because they're paying for it right then. It also eliminates the United States from potentially being torpedoed by German submarines, because it is going to be the other country's responsibilities to transport the weapons. This part of this agreement also allowed FDR to authorize danger zones where U.S. merchant ships were forbidden to enter. So again, attempting to keep the United States neutral. And that is it with Chapter 34, Section 3 notes.